How's she gonna carry the medical supplies, Run? Laughter erupted as the small woman stood before the supply depot, arms wrapped around packages of bandages, blood, adrenaline, and medical equipment. No vehicle, no priority lights. SEALs are out there. 1 minute late means someone dies. She didn't answer, just nodded, strapped the medical bag tight to her back, then ran straight into the gunfire. 9 seconds later, green signal light flashed at the field hospital. Nobody could believe it. Daria Michaela, 28 years old, European, dark brown hair, tied back, neat, small frame, lean build, from her track and field background since childhood. Cold eyes, never raised her voice. Daria was assigned to Forward Base Swan Watch, near the combat zone, between Special Forces and local militia, in the mountain region. Role: medical supply transport support. No military rank, no combat involvement, just auxiliary supply line. Everyone called her Logistics 9B. Nobody remembered her name. The logistics officers constantly teased her because she always wore that old stopwatch, recorded movement, speeds along different routes throughout the base, went running every morning, even when snow was falling. Once, she suggested trying hand delivery instead of using vehicle delivery because vehicles can't get through the North Trail. She was laughed at. This isn't the Olympics. At the medical station, a low-ranking soldier whispered, "If there's supply delivery to SEALs, let someone who knows how to shoot do it." Daria remained silent. But the fateful day came when a SEAL team reported an urgent request. Need blood, shock medication within 3 minutes. Vehicles can't get in. Mind cleared. Path isn't ready. The medical station panicked. Nobody was capable of going in there because the artillery had narrowed the route. Mine detectors hadn't been deployed, and the allowed time was only 3 minutes, too short to plan anything. Daria stepped forward, pointing at the map. "I've measured this route. If I run, it takes 9 seconds to reach the SEAL perimeter, right at the emergency point. I can carry enough." Everyone was stunned. The head nurse burst out laughing. Carry by hand? In 9 seconds? Daria said nothing. She used rope to strap a small medical bag tight behind her back, clipped additional adrenaline packages to her arm. The other logistics personnel watched with skepticism. Sergeant Hayes shook his head. "Kid's going to get herself killed trying to be a hero." Medical Officer Therese crossed his arms. "This is insane. We need proper evacuation protocol, not some running experiment." But the clock was ticking. Through the radio, desperate voices crackled. "We have a man down, critical bleeding, need immediate intervention." Daria checked her stopwatch one final time. She'd run this exact route 47 times during her morning training sessions. She knew every pothole, every piece of debris, every slight elevation change. What others saw as impossible terrain, she saw as a precisely mapped course. The base commander, Colonel Peterson, finally spoke. "We're out of options. If she thinks she can do it—" He paused, looking at the young woman who stood completely calm while everyone else showed visible stress. "Go." Daria adjusted the medical supplies one last time, ensuring nothing would shift during the run. The weight distribution had to be perfect. Any imbalance would cost precious milliseconds. She took her position at the supply depot exit, crouched low like a sprinter at the starting line. Through her earpiece, she could hear the SEAL team's increasingly urgent communications. 30 seconds until we lose him. Where's that medical support? We need those supplies now." I was once at a small base where vehicle transport was nearly impossible. There was a woman, no military rank, nothing remarkable about her appearance, who carried an entire medical supply load through an old minefield during a rainy night. I'll never forget the moment she set down that medical bag and said exactly one sentence: "Everyone's still alive."
That was the first time I understood that the person who saved your life sometimes doesn't need to carry a gun. 3, 2, 1. She bolted. The camera captured the image, a figure streaking through gunfire, leaning to avoid sinkholes, jumping over razor wire barriers. But what the camera couldn't show was the precision. Daria didn't just run, she executed a route she'd memorized down to the centimeter. Step here to avoid the loose gravel. That would slow her down. Duck at exactly this point where the sniper's line of sight was blocked by debris. Leap over the concertina wire at the precise angle that would maintain her momentum. Her breathing remained controlled, rhythmic. The medical supplies didn't bounce or shift. Everything was locked in place through technique, perfected over months of secret practice runs. At the 4-second mark, she passed the halfway point. Gunfire erupted around her, but she studied the patterns. She knew the enemy positions, their timing, their blind spots. This wasn't reckless heroism. This was calculated precision. At 7 seconds, she reached the danger zone, where most attempts would fail. This is where vehicles got stuck, where soldiers took cover and waited for backup. But Daria had identified a narrow corridor, barely 3 feet wide, where the terrain provided natural protection. She slipped through like water, finding the path of least resistance. 9 seconds. She materialized at the SEAL position like a ghost, medical bag swinging forward in one fluid motion as she dropped to a knee beside the wounded soldier. The green signal light flashed at the field hospital. SEAL medic Corman Rodriguez grabbed the supplies, his hands already working before his brain fully processed what just happened. How the hell did she— Never mind, Johnson's losing too much blood. The medical officer on the radio shouted, "Exactly on time. What route did she use?" Back at the base, people started checking records. No combat certification for Daria, no military medical training, just one small notation, athletic record, grade A, University of Minsk. But there was more. Hidden in a classified folder that hadn't been accessed in 5 years was a different story. Daria Michaela had been part of an experimental program called Tactical Medical Support Initiative, a project that trained civilians with exceptional athletic ability to perform emergency supply runs in combat zones where traditional vehicles couldn't operate. The program was shut down after a training accident where 3 participants were injured. Most volunteers quit. Daria was the only one who requested to stay on, not as military personnel, but as civilian support. Her training record showed something extraordinary. She could run complex obstacle courses blindfolded, carry 30 pounds of equipment without losing speed, and navigate hazardous terrain with precision that impressed even special forces instructors. But there was a personal note in her file written by the program director. Daria refuses all combat roles. When asked why she continues training, she said,
Someone has to be able to deliver what's needed when it matters most. Back at the SEAL position, Corman Rodriguez worked frantically to stabilize the wounded soldier. The supplies Daria brought were exactly what he needed. Not just the right equipment, but packed in precisely the order he would use them. No fumbling, no searching through a disorganized bag. Who trained her to pack medical supplies like this? He muttered, while inserting an IV line. The wounded SEAL, Petty Officer Williams, was conscious enough to whisper, "Did someone really just run through that hellscape to bring us medical gear?" 9 seconds, Rodriguez confirmed, checking his watch. "I've never seen anything like it." Through the radio, Colonel Peterson's voice crackled. "Daria, report your status." Her calm response came back immediately. "Mission complete. Returning to base." "Negative. Stay in position until we can get you extracted safely." "With respect, sir, I know a safe route back. Different path, same timing." Before anyone could protest, she was gone again. This time, she took a wider arc that avoided the direct line of fire but added crucial seconds. Still,
She appeared at the base in under 15 seconds, moving with the same controlled precision. The logistics officers who had mocked her earlier stood in stunned silence. Sergeant Hayes approached her slowly. "How long have you been able to do that?" Daria shrugged, removing the medical bag. "I've been training for situations like this since I arrived. Seem like something that might be useful?" Medical Officer Torres shook his head in disbelief. "Useful? You just saved the man's life by running through active combat." "That's what the supplies were for," she said simply, as if risking her life in a 9-second sprint through gunfire was the most natural thing in the world. "A medic once told me about a time when supplies flew into our hands like magic. I thought it was a drone. It wasn't. It was a person." Later, when I asked him about it, he just shook his head and said, "I don't know where she came from, but if she hadn't been there that day, my team would be nothing but cold bodies." Now, Special Forces Commander Colonel Marcos Reese personally came to the medical station to meet Daria. He didn't ask directly. Instead, he pulled out an old photograph, a grainy image from a military track and field competition in Poland 5 years earlier. The winner of the mixed terrain obstacle course with the record time of 9.04 seconds. Daria in the photo. But that competition was never officially published because it was part of an unofficial military training program following the Bravo 9 incident, where 5 combat medics failed to deliver supplies on time. After that incident, an experimental rapid tactical supply unit was formed. Daria was the only person to complete all the training exercises and then disappeared from the records. The reason? During a live fire training exercise, she nearly died due to a radar malfunction and refused to accept military rank because she didn't want to be a warrior, but she still requested to stay. "I just want to deliver what's needed at the right time." Colonel Reese stood at attention and saluted. "We called for everything we could get, and you delivered. Not with rank, but with precious time itself." The file he showed her contained details that even she had forgotten. Her training scores were off the charts, not just for speed, but for decision-making under pressure, route optimization, and what the instructors called tactical empathy, the ability to understand exactly what was needed in crisis situations. There was a psychological evaluation from her training period. Subject shows unusual combination of physical capability and emotional intelligence. Refuses leadership roles, but demonstrates natural ability to appear exactly where needed, when needed. Recommendation: utilize in support capacity where her unique skills can save lives without requiring her to take them. The program was classified, Reese explained, because we were trying to solve a problem that conventional military doctrine said was impossible. How do you get critical supplies to isolated positions when vehicles can't get through, helicopters can't land, and drones get shot down? He opened another folder. After Bravo 9, we lost 3 good soldiers because medical supplies arrived 4 minutes late. 4 minutes! You just proved that the right person can cover impossible ground in 9 seconds. Daria looked at the photographs from her training days. Young faces of other volunteers who had tried and failed, quit, or been injured. She was the only one still standing. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone about your background?" Reese asked. "Because it wasn't about the training," she replied quietly. "It was about the need. Every morning when I ran those routes, I wasn't practicing for competition. I was learning how to save someone." The colonel nodded slowly. "The SEAL team wants to meet with you, not to recruit you. They understand your position on combat roles, but to learn from you." Later that day, the SEALs who had received her life-saving delivery gathered in the briefing room. Petty Officer Williams, now stabilized and recovering, spoke first. "Ma'am, I've been in special operations for 12 years. I've seen impossible missions completed by incredible people. But what you did today, that was something different. Staff Sergeant Cooper added. We trained for years to move through hostile territory. You did it better than any of us could have, carrying medical supplies in 9 seconds. Daria shifted uncomfortably. You would have done the same thing. No, William said firmly. We would have tried to fight our way through. You found a way to save lives without firing a shot. That takes a different kind of courage. Corman Rodriguez pulled out his field notes. The way you packed those supplies, everything I needed was in the exact order I would use them. The blood bags were temperature stable. The adrenaline was pre-measured. Even the bandages were rolled for quick deployment. Did you have medical training? I watched the medics work. I learned what they needed and when they needed it. If I was going to risk carrying supplies through gunfire, they had to be perfect. The team exchanged glances. This wasn't just about running fast. This was about understanding the mission at a level that went beyond training manuals. Colonel Reese stood up. Effective immediately. We're implementing what we're calling the 9S protocol. 9 seconds emergency response. Not just for supply delivery, but for any situation where conventional methods won't work and seconds mean the difference between life and death. He looked directly at Daria.
We're not asking you to become a soldier. We're asking you to teach soldiers how to think like you do. The first lesson was simple, but revolutionary. Instead of trying to overcome obstacles with force, find the path that doesn't require force at all. Military doctrine teaches us to punch through problems, Reese explained to the assembled officers. Daria teaches us to flow around them. Within a week, other units were requesting to learn the 9S protocol. The training wasn't about running fast. It was about understanding terrain, timing, and human need at an intuitive level. Daria found herself in the strange position of being both invisible and essential. She still wore no rank, still received no official recognition, but soldiers throughout the base began approaching her for advice on everything, from route planning to equipment optimization. The secret, she told a group of young soldiers, isn't being faster or stronger. It's being exactly where you need to be, exactly when you need to be there, with exactly what's needed. One soldier asked, "How do you know what's needed?" "You listen," she said simply. Not just to orders, but to everything. The sound of someone's breathing tells you how much time you have. The way they move tells you what they need first. The terrain tells you how to get there. The logistics officers who'd once mocked her now sought her advice on supply chain efficiency. The medical staff consulted her on emergency protocols. Even the combat units wanted to understand her approach to movement under fire. But perhaps the most significant change was in how people thought about heroism itself. Type 9 seconds save lives. If you believe even seconds can carry lives across battlefields. A new training program opened, not just for medics or logistics personnel, but for everyone. Protocol 9S. Delivery under 12 seconds. Daria stood in front of the class but didn't hold a microphone. She simply ran alongside them, guiding them through each section of unstable ground, wind direction, how to compress equipment against their shoulders without creating vibration. A young trainee said, "I used to think if you weren't carrying a gun, you were useless. But when you delivered that blood bag at exactly the right moment, I understood that some people save lives without pulling triggers." The training was unlike anything the military had seen before. Instead of obstacle courses designed to test strength and endurance, these were precision courses that taught spatial awareness, timing, and what Daria called tactical empathy. Don't just learn the route, she instructed. Learn why the route exists. Every path tells you what the person who needs help is experiencing. Trainees learn to read terrain like a language. A slight depression in the ground might indicate recent shelling. Avoid it.
A specific pattern of debris suggested sniper positioning. Use it for cover. Wind direction affected not just movement, but also sound, which determined whether you could approach undetected. But the most important lesson was psychological. Speed without purpose is just movement. Purpose without speed is just intention. Combine them and you can save lives. The program attracted attention from other military bases, then from civilian emergency services, and eventually from international humanitarian organizations. The 9S protocol was being adapted for earthquake rescue, flood relief, and medical emergencies in urban settings. 6 months after that 9-second run, Daria received a letter from a disaster relief coordinator in Southeast Asia. Your training saves 17 people during the Jakarta earthquake. When conventional rescue equipment couldn't reach the trapped survivors, our team members used 9S principles to deliver oxygen and water through impossible spaces. In the corner of the base hallway, a small plaque was mounted.
Not everyone has the right to shoot, but everyone can save if they know how to run at the right time. Below it, Daria's old stopwatch was displayed in a small case. It no longer worked, but it served as a reminder of what could be accomplished when precision met purpose. Young soldiers would often stop and look at it before heading out on missions. Some touched the glass case for luck. Others just stood quietly, thinking about the difference between being fast and being exactly on time. The SEAL team that Daria had saved kept in regular contact. They sent updates on their missions, not for tactical reasons, but because they wanted her to know that the life she had saved was still saving others. Petty Officer Williams wrote, "I've been on 14 missions since that day. Every life I've helped save, every wounded soldier I've treated, every successful operation, it all traces back to 9 seconds when someone I'd never met ran through gunfire to keep me alive." The 9S protocol evolved beyond military applications. Emergency room doctors adapted it for trauma response, search and rescue. Teams used it for wilderness emergencies. Even firefighters incorporated its principles for navigating burning buildings. But at its core, it remained exactly what Daria had always intended: a way to be exactly where you're needed, exactly when you're needed, there with exactly what's required to save a life. The training center placed a simple motto above the entrance: speed serves purpose. Purpose serves life. Comment: I'd follow her time if you believe trust is earned in every second. After the final training session, Daria left the base quietly. She placed her old stopwatch on the equipment rack with the faintly etched inscription, 9 seconds, but if held by the right person, it's an entire lifetime. The watch no longer worked, but it remained at the supply depot entrance. Every time there was an emergency alert, people looked at it like a reminder. During the memorial service for wounded soldiers, the SEALs chose to read not the names of commanders, but the time. 9 seconds. Enough for life. What made Daria's story spread wasn't just the dramatic rescue. It was what it represented. In a world obsessed with weapons, technology, and overwhelming force, one person had proven that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply show up at exactly the right moment. 6 months later, a letter arrived at the base, addressed to the woman who ran 9 seconds. It was from a civilian paramedic in Chicago. I'd never heard of military supply protocols, but someone shared your story online. Last week, I used what I learned about route optimization and timing to reach a car accident victim.
The difference between her living and dying was literally seconds. I got there in time because I learned to think like you do. Similar letters began arriving from around the world. Emergency responders, teachers, even parents wrote about how the 9S principles had helped them be present for critical moments in ways they never imagined possible. The base commander, now Colonel Peterson, kept all the letters in a file labeled 9S Impacts. He would read them during difficult times, when the weight of command made him question whether individual actions really mattered. One letter particularly moved him, from a school teacher in rural Montana. There was a student who needed help, but I was always too busy, too far away, too unprepared. Then I learned about being exactly where you need to be, when you need to be there with exactly what's required to save a life. I changed how I pay attention. Last month, I was able to help a child before a crisis became a tragedy. It wasn't 9 seconds, but it was the right moment. The legacy wasn't really about running fast through gunfire. It was about recognizing that every person has the capacity to save someone if they develop the awareness to see when they're needed and the commitment to act without hesitation. Years later, when people asked about the 9S protocol, they weren't really asking about emergency response techniques. They were asking about how to live with the kind of purposeful awareness that makes you the person others can count on when everything goes wrong. Daria's stopwatch still sits at that supply depot, no longer keeping time, but still teaching the most important lesson. The difference between existing and saving lives is often measured not in years or months, but in seconds, and the courage to use them wisely. If you believe in stories that touch the heart like this one, leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to Iron Heart Stories. We tell the stories that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people are creating and telling stories. And your engagement matters more than ever. To help us out, please like the video, comment, and design for Iron Heart Stories.